The Roman Empire, one of the most powerful and admired civilizations in history. But behind its impressive aqueducts, its glorious armies, and its majestic temples, there was a dark, brutal side, carefully hidden from view. Did you know that there were punishments so cruel, so unimaginably inhuman, that even the Romans themselves didn't want to speak about them? Today, I'm going to take you on a journey to uncover the most ruthless and secret punishments of the Roman Empire. Practices used to sow fear, maintain power, and in many cases, completely erase the existence of those who dare to challenge the system. Stay with me until the end, because at the conclusion of this video, you'll discover the most cruel punishment of all, one so atrocious that it left a permanent mark on human history. Do you dare to know them? Then hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our darkest historical stories. Let's begin. Decimatio, the execution of 1 out of every 10. Few punishments in the history of humanity embody collective terror as perfectly as decimatio, a ruthless practice that turned Roman soldiers into executioners of their own comrades. Imagine this. An entire legion lined up in formation, the air thick, charged with fear, officers moving between the ranks, randomly selecting 1 out of every 10 men. It didn't matter if you were young or old, brave or cowardly, your fate depended solely on chance. This brutal practice was enforced when a Roman unit committed acts deemed unacceptable: desertion, cowardice in battle, mutiny, or any behavior that threatened the iron discipline that sustained the empire. Rome could not afford undisciplined armies, and decimatio became the most extreme method to instill absolute obedience. But what exactly did it consist of? Once elected, the condemned were surrounded by their own comrades, who, with blows from clubs or stones, had to carry out the execution. Yes, decimatio forced soldiers to kill their brothers in arms with their own hands. The horror didn't end there. The survivors, the 9 out of each group, found no relief. On the contrary, they were demoted, deprived of food and shelter for days, and had to watch as the bodies of their comrades fell at their feet, an indelible reminder of what happened when Roman discipline was broken. But the most disturbing aspect is that decimatio was often carried out in secret. It wasn't a public spectacle, not something done in front of the crowds in Rome, but within military camps, far from the eyes of the Senate and the people. Why? Because not even Rome, with all its brutality, wanted it to be known just how ruthless it could be with its own men. The image of the invincible legion had to remain pure, unbreakable, even if, in the shadows, these rituals of blood and death were practiced. Throughout the history of the empire, there are records of decimations during especially difficult campaigns, such as the revolts in Hispania or in the Germanic regions. On some occasions, even the generals themselves wept when they had to order this punishment, but absolute obedience was a value more sacred than a soldier's life. Can you imagine the terror of standing in formation, waiting to hear your friend's name or your own? Decimatio didn't just punish, it mentally shattered the troops, sowing a deep fear that ensured they would never dare fail in battle again. And the most chilling part is that this method wasn't abolished immediately. It survived in Roman military doctrine for centuries, like a silent ghost, always lurking in the frontier camps. Now that you know about this practice, do you think military discipline can ever justify such extreme cruelty? Leave me your opinion in the comments. Crucifixion, more than an execution, a spectacle. When we think of crucifixion, one image immediately comes to mind, that of Jesus of Nazareth hanging on the cross. But what few people know is that this method was one of the most brutal and humiliating punishments that the Roman Empire reserved for its most despised enemies. For Rome, crucifixion wasn't simply a way to execute. It was a carefully staged spectacle designed to instill fear, to break the condemned, and above all, to send a very clear message. No one defies the empire and survives. This punishment was reserved almost exclusively for rebellious slaves, deserters, thieves, and enemies of the state. Roman citizens rarely suffered this penalty, because it wasn't just about dying, but about doing so in the slowest, most painful, and most humiliating way possible. The victim was stripped of all dignity, publicly exposed, flogged until their flesh was torn apart. Then, with nails or ropes, they were fixed to an improvised cross. But here comes the most disturbing part. Death did not come quickly. The condemned could agonize for days, hanging under the scorching sun, suffering a slow asphyxiation, while crows and stray dogs circled their body. What sets crucifixion apart from other punishments is that, beyond its extreme cruelty, it was designed as a public spectacle. The cross was placed at city entrances, along busy roads, or on hills visible from a distance, so that every traveler, every citizen, every slave, upon seeing those hanging bodies, would perfectly understand the consequences of defying Rome. However, did you know that not all the details of crucifixion were known by the public? Some aspects were kept secret or were poorly documented due to their extremely inhumane nature. For example, black small square on some occasions, the Romans added extra elements of torture, such as leaving the condemned without water for days, breaking their legs to hasten death, or even leaving them hanging after death as a permanent warning. Black small square, there were also regional variations. In distant provinces, local authorities might improvise even more sadistic methods, combining crucifixion with other forms of torture. And the most chilling part, many of these procedures were not officially recorded by Roman chroniclers. Why? Because not even the empire, with all its power, wanted to be seen as excessively barbaric. Rome needed to balance its image. On one hand, a civilization of laws, culture, and architecture. On the other, a machinery of repression capable of carrying out the most monstrous punishments, but in the shadows, far from official records. One of the most infamous episodes of mass crucifixion was the suppression of Spartacus' rebellion in 71 BC. After the defeat of the rebel slave army, General Crassus ordered the crucifixion of more than 6,000 prisoners along the Appian Way, the road that connected Rome with Capua. Imagine traveling that road for miles, seeing body after body hanging, decomposing under the sun, a true highway of death. But the most unsettling thing is that many of these punishments were not reported in detail, because although Rome used crucifixion as a warning, it knew that its cruelty could provoke rejection even among its own citizens. Thus, crucifixion was, and remains, one of the most emblematic punishments in history, an instrument of terror, a method of social control, and a symbol of the darkest side of the Roman Empire. What do you think? Was crucifixion a necessary tool to maintain order, or a display of Rome's limitless brutality? Leave me your opinion in the comments. And remember, the cruelest punishment of all awaits you at the end of this video. Don't go anywhere, the worst is yet to come. Damnatio memoriae, the punishment of erasing existence. Not all punishments in the Roman Empire involved physical pain or immediate death. Some were much worse. Damnatio memoriae, the condemnation of memory, was an invisible, yet lethal punishment that sought something deeper than death, to completely erase a person's existence. Imagine dedicating your entire life to gaining power, building monuments, leaving your name in history, and then, after your downfall, the state itself orders that every trace of you be destroyed, scraped away, crushed, as if you had never lived. That was damnatio memoriae. This punishment wasn't applied to just anyone. It was reserved for those who, after falling out of imperial favor or being accused of treason, became enemies of the state. True non grata figures in Rome's official memory. But how was this sentence carried out? Black small square, statues were toppled or beheaded. Black small square faces and names were scraped from public and private inscriptions. Black small square, coins bearing their image were melted down or mutilated. Black small square, official documents containing their name were destroyed or altered. Sometimes, even portraits and frescoes and mosaics were carefully modified to remove the condemned's face, leaving unsettling voids where once there had been a powerful figure. But the most disturbing part is that this punishment wasn't limited to objects. It also fell upon people. Black small square, family members and descendants could be persecuted or excluded from public life. Black small square, servants and political allies were purged. Thus, not only was a person eliminated, but their entire network of influence, as if they had never existed. Why did Rome do this? Because the control of memory was as important, if not more, than control over the body. For the Romans, to be remembered was to achieve immortality. Glory meant having your name engraved in marble, on coins, in the annals of history. But Damnatio Memoriae took precisely that away, the possibility of being immortal. It's as if Rome were saying, not only do we punish you, but we will make it as though you never existed. One of the most famous cases of Damnatio Memoriae is that of Publius Septimius Geta, son of Emperor Septimius Severus, who was assassinated by his own brother, Caracalla. After his death, Caracalla ordered that Geta's name and image be removed from everywhere: statues, inscriptions, documents. Even on the Arch of Septimius Severus in Rome, you can still see the mark of Damnatio Memoriae. There are scraped-out sections where Geta's name once appeared. But here comes the most unsettling part. Damnatio Memoriae wasn't always completely effective. In many cases, attempts to erase someone only generated more curiosity and indirect records. In fact, thanks to the visible marks of censorship, the scraped names, the beheaded statues, modern archaeologists and historians have been able to reconstruct the very stories that Rome wanted to erase forever. And you know what's most fascinating? This practice hasn't disappeared. Throughout history, and even today, different regimes have tried to erase their enemies from collective memory. Altered photos, censored books, toppled monuments, all under the same logic. If I erase your memory, I kill you twice. So, Damnatio Memoriae is not just a dark Roman practice, but a disturbing legacy that still lives on in different forms within our culture. What do you think? Is it worse to die or to be erased forever from collective memory? Leave me your comment. And remember, the cruelest punishment of all is yet to be revealed at the end of this video. Don't go anywhere, the worst is yet to come. Live burial, the most extreme punishment of the Roman Empire. When we think of the brutality of Roman punishments, we usually imagine public executions, beheadings, or crucifixions. But few punishments are as harrowingly terrifying as being buried alive. This little-known sentence was applied in exceptional circumstances, reserved for those who, in Rome's eyes, had committed crimes so abominable that they didn't even deserve the mercy of a swift death. One of the most emblematic cases involved the figure of the Vestal Virgin. A sacred role, the Vestals were priestesses consecrated to the goddess Vesta, guardians of the eternal flame that symbolized the continuity of Rome. Their duty was to maintain physical and spiritual purity, as the fate of the entire city depended on it. But what happened if a Vestal broke her vow of chastity? The penalty was live burial. She could not be executed in a bloody way, for her sacred blood was not to be spilled. Nor could she be absolved, as her transgression was considered a direct betrayal of the city and the gods. So, Rome found a chilling solution. The Vestal was led in a silent and solemn procession to a place known as the Campus Celeratus, or Field of Crime, located near the Poena Cullei at the walls of Rome. There, a small underground chamber awaited her, equipped only with a bed, a lit lamp, a bit of bread, water, and milk, a facade of humanity that was nothing but a cruel illusion. Once inside, the Vestal was sealed alive, and the earth was thrown over the chamber, burying her in eternal silence. There were no witnesses to her agony. No one knew how long she survived, days or hours. All that was known was that slowly darkness, loneliness, and despair would end her life. But why did Rome choose such an inhumane yet hidden punishment? Because this kind of sentence represented an extreme form of absolute exclusion. Not only was the body executed, but the dishonor was buried alive, removed from the world, breaking every tie with society and the gods. Live burial was a ritualized punishment, conveying a very clear message. Whoever breaks the most sacred pact with Rome must be returned to the earth, leaving no trace. Although this punishment is mainly associated with the Vestals, there are records that in some provinces and during times of crisis, Rome resorted to variations of live burial for traitors, deserters, and enemies considered irredeemable, especially when the goal was to avoid public bloodshed or when the case involved profound religious or moral dimension. The most disturbing part is that this punishment did not seek mere physical death, but symbolic annihilation. Black small square, the condemned disappeared. Black small square, there was no grave. Black small square, there was no funeral rite. Black small square, there was no memory. Only a body devoured by the earth. This imposed silence, this lonely death, reflects one of the darkest aspects of Roman thought. The belief that In certain cases, social and spiritual death was more effective than simple execution. And what is most unsettling is that, unlike crucifixion or decimation, live burial was rarely witnessed by crowds. It wasn't a spectacle, but a somber, almost clandestine act, where the condemned was swallowed by the earth while the city carried on, as if nothing had happened. Today, this punishment still chills us, because it confronts us with one of the most universal fears: dying alone, dying in the dark, dying forgotten. What do you think? Is this the most cruel punishment of all, or simply the most silent? Leave me your thoughts in the comments. And remember, the most atrocious punishment is yet to be revealed. Don't go anywhere, because the worst is still to come. Poena Cullei, the most cruel and terrifying punishment of the Roman Empire. Get ready, because what you're about to hear is, without a doubt, the most cruel, unusual, and terrifying punishment ever applied by the Roman Empire. It is called Poena Cullei, or the penalty of the sack, and its mere mention sent shivers down the spines of even the most hardened Roman citizens. This punishment was reserved for one of the most despicable and abhorred crimes in Roman culture: parricide, that is, killing one's own father, mother, or a close relative. For the Romans, this act was not simply a crime. It was an absolute rupture with the natural and divine order. The parricide did not even deserve to die in an ordinary way. He had to be annihilated, isolated from the elements, erased from the face of the earth, and punished with a ritual that combined humiliation, suffering, and an absolutely terrifying death. But what exactly did Poena Cullei involve? First, the condemned was beaten and publicly scourged, left barely conscious. But that was only the beginning. Then, he was sewn inside a large leather sack, together with several live animals that represented betrayal, madness, and chaos. According to various sources, the animals could vary, but the most common were: black small square, a dog, symbol of disloyalty; black small square, a monkey, symbol of madness and moral deformity; black small square, a snake, emblem of deceit and treachery; black small square, and a rooster, herald of imminent death. Thus, the parricide was stuffed into the sack along with these frenzied beasts, which, once trapped, would begin to bite and attack each other and the condemned. But the worst part wasn't that. Once the sack was sewn shut, leaving no possibility to move, scream, or defend himself, the entire bundle was carried to a river or the sea and thrown into the waters, where it quickly sank under the weight of the soaked leather. The condemned then died in an absolutely terrifying way, suffocated inside the sack, bitten and torn apart by the animals, sinking into the darkness of the waters, and finally erased from the world. No grave, no funeral, no memory. But why did Rome devise such a macabre punishment? The logic behind Poena Cullei was both symbolic and practical. Black small square, symbolic, because the person who destroyed their own bloodline had to be separated from earth, air, and fire, the vital elements. Only water remained, as a cold and merciless tomb. Black small square, practical, because they sought to prevent the parricide's body from being buried in Roman soil, which would have contaminated the land with a cursed presence. For the Romans, the parricide had not only broken human laws, but had offended the gods, especially the Lars and Penalties, the protective spirits of the home. That is why he had to be punished with a sentence that transcended physical death. Poena Cullei was total annihilation. No right to burial, no memory, no redemption. The parricide became a non-being, swallowed by the waters and by oblivion. But the most unsettling part is that this punishment was practiced for centuries, from the Republic well into the Imperial era, with small variations. Black small square, sometimes different combinations of animals were used. Black small square, in some cases, one of the animals was omitted, but the principle remained. The condemned had to die in the company of symbols of his own perversion. Some historical records mention that, in moments of particular severity, scorpions or other venomous reptiles were also included, further increasing the torture inside the sack. And the most macabre thing of all, there were no witnesses to the end. Once thrown into the river, the sack disappeared beneath the waters, and with it, the muffled screams of the condemned, his desperate struggle, and finally, his silence. Can you imagine it? The cold water, the weight of the soaked leather closing in on your body, the desperate bites of the animals trapped with you, The lack of air, the absolute darkness. It's hard to conceive a more cruel, more merciless, more inhuman punishment. That's why Poena Cullei has become one of the most extreme symbols of Roman brutality. A warning of how far the human mind could go in its desire to punish what it considered unforgivable. And what do you think? Was Poena Cullei relentless justice, or barbarism disguised as law? Leave me your comment. And if this story impacted you as much as it did me while telling it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and share this video with other lovers of the darkest and most brutal chapters of history. Thanks for staying until the end. See you in the next story, where we'll keep exploring the darkest and most hidden aspects of history.